And then your grandfather proposed the solution. We bind them. Permanently. Zina's throat tightened. Her candle had burned down to a stub, but she lit another with shaking hands, unable to stop reading. They consulted Motsio Koro, the oracle keeper, the one who dealt with dark things, spirits that demanded blood for favor. I watched from the trees as they led a goat into his shrine. I watched as they emerged hours later, their faces gray and haunted, carrying instructions written on palm leaves. The covenant was simple and terrible. To bind the women's voices, a sacrifice was required. Not animal blood, human blood. The blood of a daughter. A firstborn daughter of the Okonkwo line. And your grandfather volunteered mine. Zina's vision blurred. She read the words again, certain she'd misunderstood. But no, there it was, stark and brutal on the page. My daughter. My Chinyu. 22 years old, newly married. 3 months pregnant with her first child. Your grandfather led her to the shrine under false pretenses, told her the oracle would bless her pregnancy. She went willingly, trusting him. She never came back. The official story was childbirth complications. A hemorrhage. So sudden, so tragic. But I knew. A mother knows. I confronted your grandfather that night. He would not meet my eyes. It was necessary, he said. For the family's peace. For proper order. The oracle demanded a firstborn daughter. And in return, he bound the voices of every woman in our bloodline. Now things can go back to how they should be. I asked him what he meant. He smiled. May that smile haunt him in whatever hell awaits, and explained. No woman of our blood will ever be able to name her father. Not until the debt is repaid. Not until a firstborn son is offered in exchange. The voice lives in the naming, in the power to call, to command, to summon. Take that away and we take their power. Make them choke on our names, and we make them choke on their own strength. The journal continued, but Zina had to stop. She pressed her palm against her mouth, tasting bile. Her aunt, her father's own sister, murdered and then erased, remembered only as a tragic footnote. Her death used as currency to purchase the silence of every daughter that came after. The growing realization. Dawn light crept through the vines as Zina read the final pages. Her grandmother's last entries, written in the weeks before she died. I have tried everything to break this covenant. Every herb, every counter-ritual, every prayer to every god I could name. Nothing works. The debt is too deep, the oracle too powerful, the sacrifice too complete. My son, your father Adewale, knows nothing. I could not tell him what his father did. Could not tell him that his sister was murdered to bind his future daughters. The guilt would destroy him, or worse, he would justify it. Men are talented at justifying. I have watched my granddaughter Obiageli, your mother, struggle to conceive. I have watched her bear the shame of 3 miscarriages. And when she finally carried a pregnancy to term and birthed you, Zina, I knew. I knew what you would face. I knew that when you tried to name your father, your body would rebel. The curse would manifest. You would be marked, diminished, made small. And I knew I would not live to see you break free. So I am leaving you this. These journals. These truths. The key that unlocks them. When you are old enough, strong enough, angry enough, you will find your way here. Blood calls to blood. The curse can only be broken one way. With the life of a firstborn son. A male life to balance the female one stolen. But I will not ask that of you, my granddaughter. I will not perpetuate this cycle of blood. Instead, I offer you something else. Knowledge. Understanding. The truth that you are not broken, not cursed, not less than. You are deliberately bound. And what is bound can be unbound, if you are brave enough to speak. The journal ended there. Zina sat in the growing light, her mind reeling. She thought of her mother, Obiageli, named after another powerful woman in their line, who had known all along, who had whispered warnings but never explanations, who had carried the weight of her murdered aunt's memory while watching her own daughter suffer the consequences. She thought of the women in the compound, her mother coughing blood in her room, diminished by years of silence, The third wife, quiet and invisible, never speaking unless spoken to. Even Mama Chima, the second wife, her cruelty suddenly made sense. She'd internalized the oppression, weaponized it, used the only power available to women in that compound. The power to enforce the hierarchy among themselves. And her father, Chief Adewale Okonkwo, her vision of him shifted like a kaleidoscope turning. His favoritism toward his sons, protecting them from a curse they didn't know existed. His shame when he looked at her. Not because she was defective, but because at some level, some buried level, he knew. He knew his own father had done something terrible. He knew the women in his family carried a wound he was complicit in keeping open. The rage that had been building in Zina since the market, since childhood really, crystallized into something sharp and clear. Generations of women, silenced and diminished, so that men could feel comfortable, so that men could maintain control, so that men could sleep peacefully in their superiority. She gathered the journals carefully, wrapped them in her grandmother's cloth and stood. Her legs were stiff from sitting all night, but her mind was electric, alive. When she walked back into the compound as the sun climbed higher, she saw everything differently. The way women moved through the space, heads down, voices soft, always serving. The way her father sat in the courtyard, legs spread wide, receiving without gratitude. The way her stepbrothers lounged while their mothers cooked, as if labor divided itself naturally along gender lines ordained by God himself. She went straight to her mother's room. Obiageli was awake, propped against thin pillows, her eyes sunken but alert. She saw what Zina carried and her face crumpled. "You found them," she whispered. "Why didn't you tell me?" Zina's voice was steady, but tears streamed down her face. "Why did you let me think I was broken?" Her mother's hands twisted in her wrapper. "To keep you alive. Zina, they killed my aunt. Your father's sister, Chinu. I was young when it happened, but I remember the night she disappeared. I remember the lies they told. And when I married into this family, when I learned the truth from your grandmother." Her voice broke. "I couldn't lose you too. Better you think yourself cursed than dead. So you stayed silent. Let me suffer silent." "Yes." Her mother's honesty was brutal. "Yes, I did. And I would do it again. 'Cause you're alive. We're here. And maybe that makes me a coward, but I am your mother before I am anything else." They held each other then, two women bound by the same invisible chains, weeping for what had been stolen and what had been born. The storm came 3 days later. Chief Adewale gathered the family in the compound's main parlor. All 3 wives, all 15 children, the elders he'd invited to witness. Zina stood in the corner, her grandmother's journals hidden in her room.
Today
Her
marks
heart
a
a
new
war
chapter
drum in
for
her
this
chest.
family.
"The wedding will
The
take
marriage
place
arrangement
tomorrow,"
for my
her
daughter
father
Zina
announced.
is finalized.
His voice carrying the absolute authority of a man who had never been successfully challenged. Motsi Okafor and his family will arrive at noon. Zina will be respectful, grateful, and obedient. Motsi Okafor, 52 years old, 3 wives already. A reputation for heavy hands and heavier drinking. This was her future, bought and paid for, wrapped up in the word marriage. Something in Zina snapped. "No." The room froze. It was possibly the first time she'd spoken in front of the entire family in years. Her father's head turned slowly. "What did you say?" "I said no." Her voice was quiet but firm. "I will not marry him." Chief Adewale stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "You will do as you are told. I am your father. I have decided. You are a man who benefits from his father's murder." Gasps rippled through the room. Mama Chima's hand flew to her mouth. Her father's face darkened. "You will not speak to me this way. You will not embarrass me in my own house." He moved toward her, his hand rising. And Zina felt it. The thing that had been locked inside her throat her entire life, straining against its bonds, demanding release. Voice. Her grandmother's voice. Her mother's voice. The voice of every woman in her line who had been forced into silence. She met her father's eyes and spoke his name with every ounce of rage and power in her blood. Adewale, you will not touch me. The voice came out like thunder. The walls shook. The windows rattled. The very air in the room seemed to vibrate with the force of it. Chief Adewale froze mid-stride. His hand suspended in the air. His eyes went wide with terror. Not anger but primal fear, as if he'd just heard the voice of something ancient and terrible. He staggered backward, clutching his chest, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. Then he collapsed. Chaos erupted. Women screamed. Children scrambled away. Someone ran for water. The elders backed toward the door, their faces pale, muttering prayers and curses. Witchcraft! Mama Chima shrieked, pointing at Zina with a trembling finger. She has killed him. She has cursed our husband. But Chief Adewale wasn't dead. He lay on the floor, gasping like a fish on dry land. His eyes rolling, unable to catch his breath. Zina stood frozen, staring at her own hands as if they belonged to someone else. Within the hour, the medicine man arrived. Popindu, ancient and wheezing. His apprentice trailing behind with a bag of herbs and bones. He examined Chief Adewale, felt his pulse, looked into his eyes, and shook his head gravely. His chi has been shocked, the old man pronounced. Something powerful has touched him, touched his spirit directly. By evening the sickness had spread. Chima fell ill first, fever spiking so high he convulsed. Then Emeka, unable to stand, his legs weak as water. Dubam and Ikena followed within hours, both of them crying out in their sleep, drenched in sweat. All 4 of Mama Chima's sons, all 4 golden children, laid low by something no medicine could touch. But the women, every single woman in the compound, felt different. Zina noticed it first in herself, a clarity she'd never experienced, as if a fog had lifted from her mind. Her mother sat up in bed without coughing. The third wife spoke at dinner without being spoken to first. Even the house girls moved with a confidence that hadn't been there before. Their backs straighter, their voices clearer. And Mama Chima, despite her son's illness, despite her shrieking about witchcraft, even she seemed sharper, more present, as if a weight had been lifted from her she hadn't known she was carrying. Late that night, as the compound finally fell into exhausted silence, Zina's mother came to her room. "The curse hasn't broken," Obiageli said quietly, sitting on the edge of her daughter's mattress. Her eyes were clearer than they'd been in years. "It's reversed. You spoke his name with power, and the binding snapped back on itself. Now the men carry what the women carried. I didn't mean to. I know." Her mother took her hand. "But what's done is done. And now, my daughter, you must decide. Will you finish what your grandmother started? Or will you let them bind us again?" Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. Inside Zina's chest, the voice waited, patient, ancient, and finally free. The family council. They gathered at dawn in the largest room of the compound. Elders with walking sticks and bitter memories, uncles who'd driven in from distant towns, aunties whose wraps were wrapped so tight they could barely breathe, cousins who'd heard rumors and came to witness the spectacle. The air was thick with incense and accusation. Chief Adewale sat propped in his carved chair, still weak but determined, his face gaunt and gray. His 4 sons lay on mats beside him, feverish and groaning. Mama Chima knelt between them, her eyes red from crying and rage, glaring at Zina with a hatred so pure it felt like heat. Zina stood in the center of the room, surrounded. Her mother tried to stand beside her, but 2 of the uncles held Obiageli back, their grips firm on her arms. Uncle Obi, her father's younger brother, spoke first. "This girl has brought calamity on our family. 4 strong young men struck down in one night. Our brother barely able to stand. This is witchcraft of the highest order. She should be taken to the shrine," another elder added, his voice crackling with age. "Let the oracle determine her fate." "The oracle?" Aunt Nkiru laughed bitterly. "The oracle will demand her death. We all know how these things work. Then death it should be. Mama Chima's voice cracked through the room like a whip. Look at my sons. Look at them. She has cursed them for speaking truth. For existing. My children did nothing to deserve this. The accusations built like a storm. Witch, demon, cursed thing, abomination. Voices overlapped, each louder than the last, calling for her exile, her cleansing, her elimination. Then a voice cut through the chaos. Ancient and steady. The girl hasn't cursed anyone. Every head turned. In the doorway stood Uncle Azubike, Grandfather Ikena's younger brother, now 91 years old, bent nearly double with age but still sharp-eyed. He shuffled into the room with his walking stick, and the crowd parted for him like water. Uncle, Chief Adewale said weakly, you should rest. This matter doesn't concern. It concerns me more than any of you. Uncle Azubike lowered himself onto a stool with a grunt. Because I was there. 52 years ago when your father, my brother, led 27 men into the forest to do something unforgivable. The room fell silent. What are you talking about? Uncle Obi demanded. The old man's eyes swept across the gathered family. Your father, Ikena Okonkwo, murdered his own daughter to bind the women of this family. He consulted a dark oracle. He made a covenant sealed in blood. And he offered his firstborn daughter, your sister Chinyu, as payment to strip the women of their voices. Denials. Aunt Nkiru began to weep. That's a lie, Chief Adewale said, but his voice was weak. My sister died in childbirth. Everyone knows. Everyone knows the story we told, Uncle Azubike interrupted. But I was there the night your father came back from the oracle's shrine. I saw his hands still bloody. I heard him tell the other men. It is done. The women will never command us again. They won't even be able to speak our names without their bodies rebelling. He looked at Zina, and something like sorrow crossed his ancient face. This child hasn't cursed anyone. She's undone what we did. Spoken a name with the power that was stolen from her bloodline. And now the debt has reversed itself. The men carry what the women were forced to carry. You're saying this is our fault. Uncle Obi's face reddened. That we're suffering because of something that happened before we were born. Yes. The word hung in the air like an anvil. Mama Chima stood, her whole body shaking. So my sons are dying because of your sins. Because you old men were afraid of your own wives. Her voice climbed to a shriek. My children are paying for crimes committed by dead men. The room erupted. Half the family turned on the elders, demanding answers. The other half turned on Zina, insisting that regardless of cause, she was the instrument of their suffering and had to be dealt with. Kill her and this ends. No, make her reverse it. She's the key, she has to fix this. She's a witch. Curse. Get her out. Chief Adewale raised his hand, and slowly, painfully, the room quieted.